You will not believe who the most valuable player on the Carolina Panthers roster is. We're talking about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me, as always, is former NFL scout Matt Williamson. Follow Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, we're talking Carolina Panthers today, but before we do that, we had a little bit of news over the weekend. Finally, we've been begging for some NFL news, and we got it. DeAndre Hopkins no longer a member of the Arizona Cardinals. This one made sense. We had the timeline. It seemed like Hopkins had requested a trade. There was a lot of rumors that he could be traded during the NFL draft weekend. Obviously, that did not happen. And then post-draft, there were reports that Hopkins was going to stay with the team and that had never really wanted to leave. That just didn't seem to fit. And then here we are a few weeks later. He's gone, and he'll be signing with a new team, presumably a contender for a Super Bowl. What are your thoughts on Hopkins?
Yeah, I mean, as people that follow the show probably realize, we're in a buy, sell, hold mode right now. We're going to talk Panthers today. Boy, as soon as I heard this news, I was like, sell. Just because any buzz is good buzz usually in terms.
Oh,
of
I totally agree. Yeah,
and everyone's going to think, boy, he's going to go to the Chiefs. He's at 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns. I'm like, maybe, but, the Chiefs and Bills don't really have any cap space at the moment. They got a lot of moving to do. Is he the player he used to be? Nobody traded for him. I mean, those teams wouldn't give up a 7th-round pick for him. How much do they really love him?
Yeah. Very good points. I totally agree. I was on a podcast guest spot last week before this news broke, actually just the day before, I believe. And we were talking to DeAndre Hopkins. I said on that show that he was a buy in Dynasty with the assumption at that point he was staying with the Arizona Cardinals. And a lot of the reasoning there, simply his price was so low. But now I'm totally with you. Any buzz is good buzz, as you said. I think we're going to see his price in Dynasty at least increase over the next few days, next couple weeks. I guess we'll see how long it takes for him to find a home. And certainly if it is one of those teams that is a strong contender, I think his price will go up even following that signing. But I'm with you. I would take this opportunity to I don't know if we could call it sell high, but I would make a move if there's interest in my Dynasty league in DeAndre Hopkins.
He's the perfect guy. If you use the software most people do, you just put on the block and just throw him out there by himself and see what kind of flies it attracts. You know?
Yeah. There's always going to be that one person who is buying name value, right? The brand name, the biggest name, even if they have dropped off in recent years, like DeAndre Hopkins has. So shop him while you can. We're going to talk about some other players to shop. I mentioned it at the top of the show, putting this information together for the Carolina Panthers. I couldn't believe who was at the top of the list. And just for reference, we are using one quarterback ADP. If you're playing in a super flex league, of course, the rookie Bryce Young is very valuable and a great target. But we're looking at this from a one quarterback perspective. So let's run down the names of the Carolina Panthers before we put some categories to those names. The top overall player based on DLF Dynasty ADP is Miles Sanders. He's the RB25, and he's their most valuable player in our latest ADP over there at DLF. Jonathan Mingo comes in next. He's wide receiver 42, obviously the rookie day 2 pick for Carolina. First overall pick is Bryce Young in the recent NFL draft. He's the quarterback 13 right now. third most valuable player on the Panthers. The rest of the list, lots of veterans here. DJ Chark, wide receiver 61. Adam Thielen, wide receiver 79. Chuba Hubbard, running back 64. Terrace Marshall, wide receiver 83. And Hayden Hurst, tight end 39. Matt, who is the player that you're buying from this rough list of Carolina Panthers?
You said it. I think it's a rough team. I think this is a rough list for sure. I think Chuba Hubbard, and I don't own him anywhere.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I didn't love him coming out of school, but to pull back the curtain, Sanders is a guy I don't really trust, and he's going to be he's a sell candidate for me. I read some stuff recently about some of the underlying metrics of Hubbard were better than I would have guessed, tackle breaking, breakaway stuff. I don't know that he's ever an every down guy, but I think Sanders in front of him isn't super reliable, and we might see more of Chuba than we plan.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. And Hubbard, as I said, RB64, essentially he's free. He's a throw in a trade. He might be on your waiver wire right now. So as a buy candidate, there's very little risk here because of his price. But you're right. I mean, when he's been given an opportunity, whether it was a Christian McCaffrey injury or post-trade last season when Hubbard and Deontay Foreman shared that backfield, Hubbard has played relatively well. And at running back 64, not a bad guy to take a shot on, late in your startup draft or again, as kind of a throw in a larger trade. So I don't know. We'll talk more on Sanders, I'm guessing, as the show goes on and as we talk buy, sells, and holds. The guy I'm buying here, Matt, is another veteran, but a much older veteran. I'm going Adam Thielen, a longtime Minnesota Viking. The Vikings and Thielen couldn't work out that contract situation, so he hit the free agent streets and lands in Carolina. I mean, the thing I love about Thielen and this team is he's got a chance to be the wide receiver one. He's competing with Mingo and Chark, Terrace Marshall. Marshall, I think, is pretty much a nothing. Honestly, we'll see if he comes up in conversation later. I like Chark and what he offers, but he hasn't shown that he can stay healthy, and he's really just that kind of that one trick pony. We'll talk.
Get it for nothing, well. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, the Thielen cost obviously is way down. He's wide receiver 79. You look back over even just his last 4 years. You don't want to look at his entire career. Obviously has had a lot of success with Minnesota, but some of those numbers might be skewed from earlier in his career. But even just the last 4 years, as he's battled some injuries, he's been a wide receiver 1 24% of the time, wide receiver 2 16% of the time. So he's giving you top 24 numbers. 4 out of 10 games, still pretty good, especially at that price.
I love this call. I mean, I probably am like most listeners or most Dynasty people and immediately brushed him off. He's old. I don't want him. Yeah.
Right.
For wide receiver 79, I mean, who's going to be Bryce Young's best friend on game day? Probably the reliable dude that's known how to get open since he could crawl. And I really have I don't want to say respect, but Chark and Marshall aren't for me. I mean, I don't think either one's a very good player. They don't have very good tight ends. So even if Thielen loses a step, I mean, in the fourth quarter when they're down by 14, he's probably going to get peppered with targets.
Yeah, if you look at it at Thielen's ADP history, obviously, the value, the chart is trending downward at his age. And probably that's not going to change. Maybe we'll see a few bumps where he regained some value. Actually did that this month. Last month, he was wide receiver 86 and now up to wide receiver 79. So we'll see those minor spikes, but I think what we will see is some production. This time a year ago, he was a top 50 wide receiver and just outside of the, actually he was the top 100 Dynasty player overall, now barely inside the top 200. So this is not a player you buy expecting a big value spike, but again, you can expect a couple wide receiver 1 games, couple wide receiver 2 games. If he's your third guy, your fourth guy, if he's your flex, you could do a lot worse again at that price. Just almost free, honestly, in dynasty leagues.
Yeah, he's a throw-in in a trade now, right?
Yeah, we laid out the numbers. He's not too far ahead of Chuba Hubbard in ADP. So they're both of those guys that we recommended as buys are kind of in the same range there. We're going to talk a couple players to sell as well as players on this Carolina Panthers roster that we want to hold on to, and we'll do all that next.
Guys, if you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, Built. I've told you guys about them forever. They've been a great friend to the Locked On Network. And if you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise the taste, I've got just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and taste amazing. They taste so amazing you won't think that they're good for you. You really got to try this. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, they're covered with 100% real dark chocolate. It's not the plasticky, waxy chocolate that you find on a lot of protein bars. It's 100% real dark chocolate. They have crazy flavors: churro, peanut butter brownies, probably my favorite, cookies and cream, my son loves. I'm not sure how Built quite does it, but they kind of taste like a candy bar while maintaining absolutely amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're healthy. They're 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait to get a box. I mean, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at Built.com now for years, but you can now go get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, and you can still get your specialty flavors still at Built.com, of course. So go to Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puff. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box of our hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff, and you can thank me later.
Matt, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers that we want to sell. I'm going to go first on this one. Jonathan Mingo, he's the wide receiver 42. You look back at the ADP history, and obviously it's a brief history as he is just entering the league. But back in our February data at DLF, Jonathan Mingo did not have an ADP. We have around 275 players every month drafted and earning an ADP. He didn't do that in his first month. I guess we can say in the league. So February, no ADP. March, he is the wide receiver 101 and 252 overall. So just barely squeaking in there. April, obviously still pre-draft, he sees a big jump up to wide receiver 64, 148 overall. And now our May data post-draft, 42 overall. I'm sorry, wide receiver 42 and 89 overall. So in a 3-month span, he's gone from totally undrafted to a top 100 dynasty player and the wide receiver 42. I get it. We talked about Jonathan Mingo a lot pre-draft. I really liked him. That's when I thought he might be a 3rd round rookie pick and a third, fourth, maybe even 5th round NFL draft pick. But as the value has gone up, I think it's just too much too fast. You look at the wide receivers, he's valued around, he's going ahead of Mike Williams. And I know Mike Williams has a lot of questions in his game, but he's pretty well established. And when he's on the field, you kind of know what you're going to get. It's usually positive. So ahead of Mike Williams, ahead of Cortland Sutton and Tyler Lockett, Elijah Moore, ahead of my guy Juju. Maybe that one's fair, but
that one's fair.
he's just simply overvalued right now based on our ADP.
So he was my hold for a lot of the reasons you said, but I think I like him more than you. I mean, when you compare him to some of those veterans, I don't think that's crazy talk where he's at. Like I would take him over Cortland Sutton. I would not take him over Mike Williams. So I'm sure you're in this boat too, because we know a thing or two. I'm often picking late in the first round because had success the year before or whatever. And you get to pick 10 or 11 in rookie drafts, and Mingo's my top guy on the board, and people aren't banging down your door to get to that area of the draft, and you take them. But deep down, I know most rookie drafts Jonathan Mingo would be the 16th overall pick, a mid-second rounder, an early to mid-second rounder. And I know I'm overbuying him, but I'm stuck in my pick and I'm going to take him anyway. So I own him in a lot of places, but I don't hate it. I think the A.J. Brown comparisons are bonkers, but I also think that he is a high-quality prospect. And as we've talked about with the guys around him, I don't see a lot of competition, big picture, although I know that's coming next season. And I would imagine, like they did at Ole Miss, I think they'll manufacture some touches for him behind the line of scrimmage, screens, things of that stuff that's good for fantasy.
Yeah, looking at rookie drafts, and you mentioned spending a late first rounder on him. So immediately post NFL draft, I hosted 10 one quarterback rookie mock drafts, and Mingo's value was all over the board. He went as high as 7 overall, went as low as 20 overall. So for the most part, he was being drafted 10, 11, 12. He ends up with an ADP placing him 12th overall and as the wide receiver 5. So if you're spending that late first rounder on him, that's not out of line at all based on our ADP. Yeah. And I will say, even though I think he's overvalued right now, the same thing we said about Adam Thielen could certainly be said about Jonathan Mingo. He's got a chance to be the top target on this team. Mm-hmm. And it goes without saying that he's much younger, over 10 years younger than Adam Thielen. So obviously I'd rather invest in Mingo. If I'm picking a wide receiver from this team, I just think he's a little overpriced right now.
Yeah. And it's hard to hold a rookie. I mean, I just added him to my team this week. So, I mean, he probably isn't going anywhere anyway, but he was my hold. So,
yeah. Most of the
good.
Well, I was just going to say, because of that, most of the trades we see in the trade finder on DLF are just people getting their second rounders back, right? You draft Mingo and then you trade him for a future 2. Maybe you get a future 2 and a 3. Those are the types of trades that he's being involved or included in right now. Matt, who's a player that you are selling from this Carolina Panthers roster?
Well, maybe we do this. So how about we take our break since I revealed my hold and we can talk my sells. I have 2 and your holds. How's that sound?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. We'll do that next. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Every dayers. Tomorrow on the show, we will be back. We will be talking New Orleans Saints and the players to buy, sell, and hold from that roster. Join us tomorrow and check that out. All right, Matt, we are back. We've got my hold. We've got your sell. I'll let you go first this time.
Okay. I hinted at the top of the show, Miles Sanders is my sell.
Yeah.
And I don't feel super strong about it. Like, boy, I have to get out because he's immensely talented. He really is. He actually grew up around here. He was a 5-star recruit, but he was highly, highly inconsistent in the best of situations. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I do like Frank Reich as a head coach. I like the offensive line. But this is far from the best of situations. And if he's going to be asked to be a bell cow, be a real stabilizing force, I don't know that that's who he is. I mean, a reliability at the running back position is really important, and I just don't see it with him. His flashes are great, though. And then my other sell is Bryce Young because he's small, and I think he's going to get hurt. I mean, I sound like an old school curmudgeon scout with a cigar and a chew-in and, you know, scratching and sniffing, but I just don't trust him to stay healthy at all. I really don't.
So let's start with Young here, Bryce Young.
Okay.
You've got some concerns. I think those concerns are shared by a lot of people, the similar concerns. He's the quarterback 13. And when I looked at that, honestly, I couldn't decide if I thought if he was overpriced or if he offered a nice value at that ADP. He's ahead of Tua, obviously ahead of CJ Stroud. And then you get into some of the veterans, Daniel Jones, I guess we could include in that group. And then the older veterans, Cousins, Smith, Goff, Russ, Rodgers. So I think he belongs in this group. Both rookies do. maybe you can move him down a little. I don't know. Do you want Tua or Bryce Young right now? Both have some injury concerns.
I mean, you said those names, and it's not a glaring great group of quarterbacks right there. And I bet that shakes itself out throughout the season. Some will fall off, some will step up. I would rather have Tua just because I have almost equal durability concerns, which is rough on the Yorkie. Don't get me wrong. But Tua, I can start right now, and I know he's going to produce for me and do really well. So if I look at
much better offense, much better weapons.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to sound like the biggest homer ever. I might rather have Kenny Pickett.
Oh, yeah.
He was miserable last year.
But he's way too far down the list, I will say. But I heard I was listening to a basketball podcast, and they were talking about Victor Wembanyama, and of course he's going to be the first overall pick. We know that. And essentially the discussion was, we know he's going to get hurt with his frame, with his body type. We know he's going to get hurt in the NBA, but the upside, and
he's like super skinny, right? I just know the name. Okay. Yeah.
Very tall, 7'5", I think. Wow. And thin, but has crazy elite skills. He's being called the best prospect certainly since LeBron, and maybe the best prospect ever, depending on who you listen to. But regardless, the discussion was, we know he's going to get hurt, but he's still worth it because of the upside. Is it a similar idea with Bryce Young? We know he's going to get hurt. He's too small, whatever. We know he's going to get hurt, but when he's on the field, is his upside, his playmaking, what he brings to the game still worth it? You would say no, it sounds like.
I mean, not to that comparison to the LeBron, Luck, Lawrence, slam dunk first overall pick comparison. That's a good conversation. But I don't think it will be this year. I think it's going to be a struggle. So that's a whole year that I can't really use him. And maybe more than he's going to get hurt and he's never going to be on the field, he might just not last. 5 years from now, what's he going to be?
That's certainly a different conversation when you're comparing football and basketball. So that makes sense. I could see, based on what you're saying and based on the current ADP, I could see Bryce Young losing some value, which is pretty rare for rookies, especially elite rookies, to do. Maybe this is a situation you can buy Bryce Young cheaper this time next year, at least in one quarterback leagues. I don't know if that's going to be true in super flex leagues, but in those one quarterback leagues, possibly.
One note I meant to mention at the top of the show is, if you look at salary cap space, the Panthers are loaded after this year. So they might have a Bears-like offseason. I know they don't have their first round pick, but whoever the top receiver is, they might just go buy him. So things might look better than they do now. I just expect it to be a really rough year.
Let's finish up. You mentioned Miles Sanders as one of your sells. I had Miles Sanders as my hold. I don't know that you can get a lot for him, even though he is somehow the most valuable player or the player with the highest ADP on this roster. I don't know that he's giving you much. He had his best season of his career, at least his best season since his rookie year last year. Ended up with 4 games as a quarterback, as a running back 1, and finished as the running back 13. Second time he's done that, a running back 15, I'm sorry. Second time he's done that in his career, also dating back to his rookie season. So the narrative with Sanders has been he couldn't handle the heavy workload, and that's why we saw a committee in Philadelphia. Are you buying into that, or was that just kind of game plan for the Eagles that they wanted to use multiple backs?
I mean, this translates to fantasy, but I do think, like Greg Cosell talks about this, that the true workhorses have a mindset. Emmitt Smith's shoulders on the ground and give me the ball to close a game out. Like, I'm not saying Miles Sanders is a wuss. I mean, there's not many of those, give me the ball over and over, Jonathan Taylor's out there. And I just don't think he's ever shown to be that guy. So we often talk about running backs from a redraft standpoint, like, do you think he's an immediate starter in week 1 for your redraft team even, or is he a flex right now? You know, I mean, the situation's not very good.
Yeah, that's obviously the other thing to consider is this team is going to be bad. Yeah, I mean, he's
borderline, you know?
Yeah, he's borderline for sure. I mean, it comes down obviously to how many starters you have to have and your team build. If he's my running back 2, I don't feel great about that.
Right.
You know, and that's kind of evidenced even by his dynasty ADP at running back 25 outside of that RB2 range. Yeah, I mean, I think there's concerns about upside here, right? I mean, he's had 2 30-point games in his career. So yeah, I think, I don't know. I just don't think you can get enough for him that makes it worthy to sell him. I mean, like, are you going to flip him you're going to flip him for a second rounder? I don't think you're getting a first rounder for him. If you can, then obviously do that. Selling him for a second, selling him for a guy like his teammate Jonathan Mingo, I mean, that's fine. But at this point, he's kind of in that David Montgomery range. Like, let me just hold him, start him as my flex guy or as my RB3 each week, and hope I hit on that week that he gets double digit or you know, gets 20 fantasy points.
Or maybe he strings 2 good games together and then you dump him.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if his stock goes up a little, like, okay, now people are calling for him.
Yeah. True.
I'm sure he is hard to move right now, though.
That will do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Remember to follow the show at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL, and I'm Ryan MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.